What we're going to cover is how to master both public speaking and presentations. And the point of this is really to not only help you in a situation as if you were in my place right now talking to a large audience of a couple hundred people, but when you're in the workplace environment and you're giving a presentation, anytime you're doing any kind of public speaking, how do we really replicate and bring in the lessons of what the absolute best people in the world, the biggest masters of public speaking do? So without further ado, please join me in welcoming comedian, best friend, all-around amazing talent, Ben Glebe.
Hello. What's going on, Jason?
So just to go over some of your credits so that folks know, you've been a stand-up comedian and actor now for 12 plus years.
Yep, thank you so much for having me, guys. Good night.
You're
supposed to leave people on top, and that was a nice intro, so that's good.
You're one of the upcoming voices in Ice Age 4.
That's true.
You just, a little while ago, finished being on tour with Dane Cook to amphitheaters of like 10,000 people.
Not amphitheaters, arenas, NBA arenas, NHL arenas, 5,000 to 12,000 people a night.
That's bigger than what I normally do.
That is true.
And you've done over 90 appearances on Chelsea Lately.
That is also true.
And you had your own show on NBC called Real Wedding Crashers, where you actually crashed people's weddings.
I did. I'm not a nice person. You have to realize that. No, I did. Nobody watched that show. It was canceled very quickly. But I also have a show right now airing on Sci-Fi called Insane or Inspired, so you can watch that. It's better than the other show.
So this is actually not the first time that Ben and I have been on stage together, so I thought I would start off telling you guys a bit of a story.
Just really quickly before you do that, can I just say, not only I wanted to thank you for having me here, Jason,
Yes.
but also for outdressing me by about 3 times. He usually wears what I'm wearing, so I didn't want to outdress him, so I'm like, I'll just wear like a wrinkled shirt and pants, and then Jason's wearing like a 3-piece suit up here. It's very good.
And you asked me to bring you socks for the event. All right, so
I did.
Ben and I
did ask that.
Ben and I, when we were graduating college, I convinced Ben that we should take a weekend class on hypnosis together. So in case you don't know, I'm actually certified in hypnosis. And certified in hypnosis. And I went around telling all these people that I was a certified hypnotherapist when I was 21. So invariably, one of my friends came up to me who was in a fraternity at UCLA, and he asked me if I could do this stage hypnosis show at UCLA. And I had never done a stage hypnosis show. I didn't know what it was. In that weekend hypnosis class, there was an hour video on somebody else doing a stage hypnosis show. And I was like, yeah, of course, no problem. Sign me up. I'm going to do the show. It's 2 weeks before I had to go do the stage hypnosis show. We're having a house party. And I interrupt everybody there. And I said, hey, I'm about to go do the stage hypnosis in 2 weeks. I just wanted to see if I could practice on everybody here. And so I lined up 4 people. And I did this long induction talking about a forest and a relaxing, bubbling book, and counted down from 10 to 1, and people were getting tired and seemingly went into trance. And then I went up to the first person, and I told her that she was going to forget the number 4. And the way the game works is that you pull out somebody's hand and you have them count on their fingers, and they go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then you realize, would you have 6 fingers? And so I have her start counting. She goes 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm like, crap, she didn't forget the number 4. So then I'm like, no, you're going to forget the number 4. And I start getting angry at her and like yelling at her and pleading with her. And she still totally remembers the number 4. So then Ben's sitting next to her. I'm like, okay, well, at least if Ben, and then I told Ben that he was going to forget his name. And before I could even go start the game, Ben's like, Jason, I remember my name. So I leave the party in total shame, right? I've completely just embarrassed myself in this public speaking event. And I now, in 2 weeks, have to go present in front of a room this size to a fraternity that paid me money. I'm like, I am going to get killed.
And he has to grapple with the fact that even if it did work, that might be the most boring game possible. I went to this crazy hypnosis show. The guy couldn't remember a number for a second. So we get a lot of issues to tackle right now.
So I called the person that had taught the seminar, and I said, please, you have to tell me what I do to make the show work. And he reluctantly agreed. He said, hey, here's how you make a stage hypno show work. But before we get to that, what I want to talk to you about is this idea of nervousness that we all have. Because what's the probably single biggest thing that's on all of your mind right now? It's how do you get over being nervous when you're speaking in a public environment. And the first and most important thing I can tell you, more important than anything else, is your audience doesn't care about you. They care about them. And the biggest thing that gets us all tripped up and that we all worry about is that we stand here and we see this pair of 500 eyes looking at us. And we think all these people are thinking about us. But you're not thinking about me. You're thinking about you. And so if you learn as a speaker to talk to people about them, if you learn to talk to people about them, you will have that audience, you will have that room always in the palm of your hand. And that's what we're going to show you here tonight.
Right, to expand upon that point, this is something I like to always talk about public speaking, is stay in the pocket and never let them see you sweat. People always have this false perception when they're about to speak in front of people, whether it's a presentation for 7 people or it's in front of a large audience like this, is that people think when someone's speaking in front of a group that there's an expectation of perfection. You all think in your head, I need to be perfect up there. Everybody's judging me. And you have this vibe that you're being hyper-judged by everybody in the crowd. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Not only people thinking about themselves, people also have very low expectations in life. People are not expecting Barack Obama to come up there and woo them into changing the planet. They're just glad they're not talking, and they just want to get some content from you. That's all they want. So remove every bit of the nervousness that is overtaking your body and realize it means nothing. Nobody cares. What's a stage even? Let's say you're doing one of these presentations. This isn't made of a different material. It's not lava or shards of glass. This is just raised so it's easier for you guys to see us, not to make it harder, not to make it scarier.
One of the things I'm always impressed about is that in your stand-up comedy, you do a ton of improv. So you'll actually go off of just stuff that you write, and you'll call out people in the audience, and you'll ask them what they do, and just start making fun of them. But sometimes it takes, a little while until the joke hits. And I've watched you do this for 10 years, and I'm always nervous. Like, what's he going to do? What are you going to say? Where are you going to take this? And you do just what you said. You just stay in the pocket, and you keep working through it until you find the funny thing that you want to kind of dig in about.
Right, stay in the pocket. That's a football term. For those of you who aren't football fans, I'm not really either, but I like the phrase. When a quarterback draws back to make a pass, he has all these tools already set up to block for him and to take care of him. And what you don't want to do is leave that pocket early. Just stay there until the very last second. As long as you don't get nervous and crumble, you're going to find a pass to make. You're going to find a perfect pass. You're going to find a way to succeed and connect with that audience. The only mistake you can ever make is acknowledging that you're nervous about it, acknowledging that you think you failed that moment. That's the only mistake you can make in public speaking, is to say, oh boy, that didn't go great. Anyway, and that's not to say you can't admit a mistake. You should admit mistakes. When mistakes are obvious and they're glaring, right off the bat, admit them. Just don't admit them in a way that affects your confidence. It's a confidence builder to admit a mistake, because that's one of the biggest mistakes that humankind makes just in life in general. It leads to wars, but definitely leads to bad speeches too, is not admitting a mistake. People think, oh, I've already done this. I have to now pretend that I'm this person. No. You're a human being. You make mistakes. Obama makes mistakes in every speech he gives every time, but he just breezes by it. And when it's real bad, he goes, that wasn't what I wanted to say.
George Bush made a lot more mistakes.
George Bush made a lot of mistakes, both linguistically and crumbling the planet.
Fooled me once, shame on you. Fooled me twice, can't be fooled again.
Yeah, he's a
All right, move over.
brilliant orator, that guy.
The trick of public speaking is to be able to learn how on stage or in a presentation to talk just like you normally do. It actually takes a lot of practice and a lot of work for me to be able to talk to you right now, just like I would when I get off the stage after the presentation, we're talking one-on-one and you have a question. And that's what you want to feel. You want to feel like we're right now having a one-on-one conversation between us, even though there's 500 people in the room right now. And one of the things that actually takes practice too is to figure out how to just talk like you normally do. What do most people do when they give a speech? They get nervous and they get tight and they go into their speech voice. So tonight, Webster's Dictionary defines public speaking as nobody talks like that.
People even add echo to their own voice oftentimes. They'll sit there at the podium. They're normal, nice, loose people in life. They know how to make their friends laugh and communicate like normal human beings. They get to a podium and they're like, fellow humans, we are here today to pause in incredibly strange places. Just speak normally. That's the most engaging thing, is to be a unique human being that you already naturally are. We'll get to that later.
That's really key in stand-up comedy, too. Like, you were telling me how a comedian was telling you it takes most comedians 7 years to find their voice.
Right.
And the thing that I always remember when I would see new stand-up comics, and when you were first starting out, is it's so awkward how they talk. It's like, that's not how they make people laugh in real life.
Right.
They get on stage and they get all nervous and weird.
Well, it's true. Once you hit the stage, oftentimes people, or for a presentation, you just clam up and you think that people want you to present a certain way, and it's just not true. What you want to do is be natural. Be yourself, because like I just said, nobody else is you. If you try to be like everybody else, you're going to fail, because there is no one template for people. So you're doing some cheap imitation of some great speech Winston Churchill gave in a black and white recording from 50 years. I don't know when he was alive. You understand the point. This isn't a history lesson. Don't judge me on dates. But like, by the way, right there's a good example of a mistake. Like, as I was saying that, my mind went, oh shit, I don't know when the fuck Winston Churchill was alive. But then I realized I could pretend like I know and be like, oh fuck, and then have it affect the whole rest of my speech. Or I could say, I don't know when he was alive, guys. Does it really matter? Nope.
You shouldn't worry about making breaks in a presentation. Like, for example, John, who's shooting the video in the back, make sure when Ben's talking or I'm talking, you're doing a one shot, not a two shot together. And I'm actually telling you this right now, but that's applicable because
also,
when you're
John,
doing,
please be sure to edit this part out. Be great.
oftentimes you feel like you can't break that fourth wall, that you can't do anything that interrupts the presentation, but it actually makes it a lot more natural and normal just to say what's going on in the environment. All right, the last key overall point that I have is that I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that when people are talking, they'd actually have no frame of reference to know what you're talking about, and they get lost. And this is most easily noticed when you're going to come up to me afterwards, or other people here, you're going to pitch your business idea. And the simplest way to get a point across is to go back to how we did it and how we were taught in 5th grade to write a book report, which is you start with your thesis, you start with your conclusion, you give 3 examples, and then you go back to that conclusion at the end in your thesis. And oftentimes, when you hear me give a point, or when I talk about a new subject, I'll explain the topic, I'll go on examples, and I'll go into it again. Keep it short, keep it simple, and keep it like a 5th grade book report. If I were to ask you to explain a concept like gravity, what you should do to explain it is tell what the scientific definition is, even if somebody doesn't understand it first. Give 1 or 2 examples so someone has a mental comprehension of it, and then go back to the scientific definition at the end. That's how they'll end up comprehending that point.
And this tip, by the way, is especially helpful if you do, in fact, find yourself delivering a 5th grade book report. Definitely use that. Sure, basically, you know, people put so much pressure on themselves. Like we said earlier, we're going to talk a lot more about style points and techniques of how to give more dynamic speeches as we go in presentations. But realize all that's gravy. All that really matters is 2 things: content and confidence. That's the only 2 things that matter. Much more important than anything is what you're saying. So don't make yourself the issue. Like Eminem's quote, "You better lose yourself in the moment, own it, and never let it go." That's the best quote, because you have to lose yourself in the moment because it's not about you. It's about what you're saying. So don't make your presentation and yourself the issue. Make sure that you are so immersed in the content of what you're saying and derive your confidence from that. So here's the thing you have to realize is, I used to be, you know, people say that the biggest fear of most people is public speaking, right? I used to be exactly in that boat. I always had this like comedic brain and wanted to entertain people, yet I grew up with a very severe speech problem for most of my life. I had pretty devastating, beyond a stutter, I couldn't even make sounds come out of my vocal cords for a lot of my life. I wanted even to say hi to a friend I'd passed in the hallway and I couldn't make sounds come out. And there were physical reasons why that might be a problem for certain people. For me, I always knew in the back of my head it was a psychological problem. I was just adding all this pressure to public speaking. Like we were saying, I thought people expected me to be perfect. And when I got called on, it was all eyes on me. And it was like, oh my God, all of these judgmental sons of bitches looking at me right now. And I realized just the opposite is true. It just doesn't matter. Always remind yourself, if you ever get nervous for a speech, remind yourself of serious problems happening on the other side of the globe. Remind yourself beyond that, that we are spinning on a marble in outer space in a vast, unknowable universe. You're worried now about your tie or your middle square or whatever it is? Don't worry, let it go and just focus on what it is you're there to do, the message. Another quotation I love that years ago Kenyon Martin said during the NBA playoffs. They asked him, how do you perform under pressure? And he said, never let the moment be bigger than what you're trying to accomplish. That's huge.
So let's go into some actual tactics now. I'll go over a couple of these, and then Ben will go over a couple of these. These are specific things that I've learned along the way and tried to do in all the talks and speeches that I give. So first off is I will often talk in 30-second sound bites, meaning that I think the biggest mistake people make is that they carry on too long about a specific point. If it takes you a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes to explain a point, you're doing it incorrectly. We are all trained from the moment we start watching TV that messages, commercials, get delivered to us in 30 seconds. So I will literally talk about a point, and after 30 seconds, just stop. And if that point's not completed, give people some time to comprehend what I'm talking about, and then try to finish it after that. I literally talk in short, 30-second chunks to go over each point I'm talking about. Number 2, your energy needs to carry your audience and your crowd. And again, this doesn't make a difference whether it's 400 people sitting in a presentation about how to public speak, or it's you talking to your boss and 2 other people that you report to. They need to feed off of your energy. And is our COO Mike here? I saw him. He just stepped out for a second. Like the whole joke about Mike is that he yells everything, but he does it with a smile on his face. And it just brings this energy to everybody there. And the simplest thing that you can do to infuse energy, because you don't always have to get bigger or louder or crazier, it's just smile. You'll see that every talk that I do here, when I come up and talk about startups Uncensored, I start off with a smile on my face. And it's a nonverbal cue to all of you to what you should be doing in response, and it immediately sets the tone of the energy. You're going to feed off of my energy tonight. You're going to feed off of Ben's energy tonight. Our energy needs to carry you guys.
Some would say that sometimes Jason smiles too much during his talks. But that's a better side to err on than not smiling at all, because you look very creepy then, much like Winston Churchill did. Notorious non-smiler, just so you know.
Next tactic. Silence is the most important tool that you can use for emphasis and for understanding.
That's an excellent point. Also,
one of the things that adds texture to a talk, that adds context, that adds richness, is just to stop talking. And what we all get conditioned to think is that if we stop talking, people are going to think we don't know what we're saying. That's not what you are all thinking. You're just really waiting to hear what I'm going to say next. And silence, first of all, is the most important thing that you can use to actually help somebody build comprehension. If you're explaining a point, you can't keep talking about it on and on really quickly and say you have to do this and you have to do that also, but don't make a mistake to do this, because I'm not giving you any time to understand the point and settle in, and then you're going to think, I didn't understand anything this person was saying, and when I go on to the next thing, you're really not going to understand what the fuck I'm talking about. Whereas if I just pause and let you settle into a point, it gives the audience time to comprehend what we're saying. The other thing is it's the most important thing. I could get up here and I could jump around and we could make jokes and we could do everything, but nothing is as valuable and effective to build emphasis as simply 5 seconds of silence.
and just for the record, he skipped the number 4 there. Another thing too, and we'll talk a little bit more about silence a little later, but one other thing it does is, since everybody's thinking about themselves and is always stuck in their own heads when somebody else is speaking, when you're silent, it puts everybody on edge. They're like, did I screw up? Am I being called on? What happened? I'll just say that point now. We'll skip the slide later because it's more appropriate at this moment. Is when I was first starting out stand-up comedy, one of the best tips I ever got, my friend Steve Byrne told me that someone had taught him, is when the checks get dropped towards the end of a show, and everybody has to pay their bill, the audience always gets invariably really loud for a couple minutes, and it gets really hard to perform over. And every comedian tries to talk over it and tries to compete over that. And all it does now, you have this cacophony of horrible noise happening in this room. But the point being is when the checks are getting dropped, or when the audience starts to get rumbly or loud or a little restless, you wait. Like there was one man who was even clearing his throat, and you wait over that. And then you get everybody. And it's the best tool in the world to command an audience's attention.
Let's talk about eye contact. The basic rule that we all know is that to make sure to give everybody some sense of eye contact. You all know when you've been in a meeting with somebody, and maybe it's you and 4 or 5 other people, and they're not looking at you, and they're looking at just other people. And you're thinking to yourself, why isn't this person looking at me? Please look at me. Just give me some of your eye contact, please. And one of the mistakes I see people in my company make a lot is that when they go to present to our board in board meetings, they'll hone in on the one person that's sitting there and nodding at them and giving them positive feedback, and they'll talk to them the whole time. That's a huge mistake. Not only do you have to make sure to give everybody eye contact, but what most of us do in terms of eye contact is we just glance over an audience. And we really don't talk to anybody. And one of the most important things that I was taught is that when you make eye contact, talk to one person directly for 5 seconds, like I just am right now. And that person in the audience is going to feel like, what the fuzz is happening right now? Why is this speaker looking at me and not going away? And I know a lot of you have already seen me do this to you this evening, right? And what it does is I may not look back at you for the rest of the night, but you are going to sit on the edge of your seat and pay attention because you're like, this mofo from the stage is going to single me out and look at me.
And it's a very effective tool. Like right now I'm using this tool, and it's very effective. It's perhaps a little weird when it's more than 5 seconds and it's directly to Jason's girlfriend.
And this goes into eye contact also, which is the idea of trance. The reason why we lose track of what we need to do is that we go into trance. We go into our own head. And the rule of thumb is that if you can't remember, if you're talking to 4 or 5 people and you can't remember what they're wearing, then you went into trance, which means you're not paying attention to your audience. You're not looking at their verbal and nonverbal cues to see how they're responding to what you're saying. And you're just talking at people instead of having a conversation. And to truly have a conversation and for this to be a dialogue and for you to get value out of this, I can't just be in my own head saying things that I think are important while I totally zone you out.
Put it to the test, presentation boy. What am I wearing?
You're wearing a striped shirt and a black tie and jeans and brown shoes.
What about his socks?
He doesn't have socks, I didn't bring them. What am I wearing, Mr. Comedian?
I have no idea. No, you're wearing like a black blazer with a Jim Walsh from the original 90210 collared shirt, tie, jeans, nice shoes, look better than me, I get it.
All right. Key thing, if you leave a presentation with your boss and a couple other people and you can't, coming out of that meeting, say what they're wearing, then you were stuck in your own head and you weren't really talking with them, you were just talking at them.
All right, as you can read here, it says, ride the wave, surf the crowd, read the room. What you want to make sure, it's very similar to the point we were just talking about silences and being aware of where people are. The room has energy. To me, stand-up comedy, I always analogize it to like a nuclear explosion. It's one person in the middle of a room of people, and you say something, and boom, the energy explodes out across everybody. We're all completely connected, right? I mean, quantum physics even theorizes that there is no space between us. There's no difference between people because the air is made of the same materials that we're all made of. So I always say that people are like lumps in the cosmic oatmeal. We're lumps, we have our own little shapes, but we're all part of this amorphous, connected thing. So uncomfortable right now. So, yeah, lumps can get closer to each other sometimes, and it's not necessary. But the point being...
Are you calling me a lump? I'm the lump in this situation? Who's the lump? Are you the lump or am I the lump?
You're lump, you're in my head.
I'm the lump, okay.
It's an old song. Remember that song? All right. I would have sung it, but nobody wants to hear that. Point being, you want to make sure that you adjust yourself to the room and you ride the energy of the room. When I perform at a comedy club, I do an hour 15 headline set. All comedy, all jokes I've told 1,000,000 times because I have to write new jokes. But when you're doing your act, you have a certain way you want to say it. You're still going to fail. If you are stuck in your certain way, you do this bit, but this is a small crowd, or it's tired, or it's the late show and they're drunk, or the people you're presenting to are tired, it's the end of a long day, you're the 8th person presenting. What you want to make sure you do is read the energy of the room and connect and flow with those people. And when you find that there are certain parts of the room that aren't so focused, certain people that you know you haven't grabbed their attention fully, you address it to those people. Just point your energy that way. You don't have to point, but just bring your energy that way until you win that person over. Often if there's a crowd laughing and there's one guy in the 3rd row that's not laughing, I will literally sometimes call it out. I'll be like, sir, what is it that you don't like about me? Let's get to the bottom of this. Or you can do it without saying that. You can just go to that person and deliver to them, because now you're really reading their reactions. You're seeing what it is that they react to. Like this man right here didn't love it when Jason came close to me, and I appreciate that. But now you're back on board. You're smiling and laughing. We can move on. This is very stupid, what's on the screen. But the point of it is simply, for this one, is an elaborate way to make you realize one thing. When you're speaking to a group of people, take your time. There's no rush. Like Jason said earlier, when you run through all your points, 1,000,000 miles an hour like the Micro Machines guy, no one's going to take anything from it. What's dynamic is to take your time and make sure you punctuate the important parts of what you're saying.
I want to go back to a previous point, because we talked about not taking yourself too seriously. There was a great story of what happened before you did your first amphitheater talk with Dane Cook, right before you went on. How large was the audience?
It was an arena. It was the Trump Taj Mahal Arena in New Jersey, in Atlantic City rather. Dane Cook asked me to open for him, and this is before we went on a 31-city North American arena tour.
That was the biggest audience you ever presented to at the time?
Well, it was the biggest audience I'd done stand-up comedy for,
Yeah.
which is a totally different beast. And so he invited me, and it was 5,000 people in the round.
As opposed to your bullfighting days, what other?
I used to be a very famous bullfighter at the Plaza de los Toros in España.
All right.
And he's bringing that up. It's painful memories. You don't want to see me with my shirt off. I'm very gored back there. No, but I spoke at my college graduation. There's more people.
Oh,
but,
that's right. That's right.
But technically speaking, that was the biggest crowd for stand-up comedy. And I don't get nervous to perform in front of people, to do stand-up comedy. I've done it for so long, even though I used to get frightened beyond belief when I had my speech problem. But this one night, I was nervous. We fly to Atlantic City. We're in the round, meaning the audience is all around you, 360 degrees. And I'm the first one to go up on this show. No opener, no warm-up, nothing. And I have to make this entire arena of people laugh. And the room wasn't set up well. There were huge gaps between the different sections. They weren't even a cohesive oatmeal bowl. It was like very disparate. And I was nervous about it. And I'm in the green room before the show starts. And you hear the buzz of all these people paid $100 each to come to the show. And we're in the green room. And Dane Cook can sense that I'm a little bit on edge. But I'm trying to stay focused in my zone and, just do whatever I normally do before a show and not have anything faze me and go out there and perform. And literally, they start doing the intro video, so I know I have about 90 seconds until I'm on stage. And Dane sees me sitting there on the couch like this, and just like in my own zone. And he's standing right near, I'll never forget this, he's standing right near the craft service table. And there was like vegetables and lettuce and all these things, fruit. And Dane takes a huge wet piece of lettuce and throws it right on my crotch. And I was wearing light colored pants. And I look, I'm like, what did you just do? I look like I just peed myself. I'm about to go in front of 5,000 people like I have bladder control issues. What do I do? And he was like, relax. The point is relax. This is fun. It's life. Just go out there and have fun. I'm like, strong point. Please find a blow dryer. And he did, and he blew dry my pants. I went out there and it was good, but it totally relaxed the situation. That's the point. is don't take yourself too seriously. Who cares? Even if I had peed in my pants, even if you're about to speak in front of something, you're trying to get VC funding for your life's work, and you pee your pants, they're going to remember that meeting. This guy came in with peed pants and blew us away. Nothing can affect your presentation. Things will go wrong. Mics will go out. You'll pee your pants. One time a fight broke out during a set I was doing. Literally a fist fight broke out. It didn't affect me. I just started doing play-by-play announcing of the fight. Nothing can go wrong except admitting weakness. Just never have weakness. There's no reason to. You're not that important. That's another thing. People are so boring when they speak. People are so monotone, and people are very expressive naturally in their lives. Even some of the most quiet, soft-spoken people have these cute little voices they do and funny little techniques they use when they speak, but they go on stage and they're like, oh, I don't want to seem like a human. I should probably speak strictly about this, because clearly what I'm trying to achieve is to say these words and have no impact on anybody. Why? Your voice is an instrument. It's an amazing instrument. You can affect your vibrations, your intonations, your tonality, the octave you're speaking at, the speed, the energy. You can speak high. You can get low for serious points. Whatever, just don't do that. It's the only thing you shouldn't do. No, even that. Do anything you want to do. Just be more dynamic. Make it interesting to watch.
Use your voice as an instrument.
I learned that from George Carlin. My favorite comedian in the world. He once said that he does not look at, when he writes his stand-up bits, he does not look at it like he's just writing a joke. He looks at it as an orchestral arrangement. He literally will write jokes and build things to bullshit close. And then go here, I don't want to give him to me. Well, there you go. And it's literally this like tapestry. It's the most engaging thing to listen to. It just draws people in. If you have tools at your disposal, why not use them? That's what my father, the carpenter, told me. He's not a carpenter. Jewish family, very bad with tools.
Except for one Jewish guy who was a good carpenter.
That's true, but he left us.
He did. But going back to using your tool as a voice, you do a couple impressions,
or
right?
your voice as a tool, you mean? You said
Yes.
tool as a voice.
Yes.
You can't use tools as voices. You grab a hammer, try to make it talk, you get locked up. What do you
Do
say?
you have like an impression that you could do to show how you could stretch your voice?
An impression I could do? I guess. I started out as an impressionist comedian. I haven't done them in about 10 years, but sure. Which one do you want to hear?
Which one is on the money and is good these days?
God, I don't know. I don't really do them these days, but I don't know. Jack Nicholson, dynamic speaker. Jack Nicholson is one of the most dynamic speakers ever. You want to see a guy who knows how to use his voice as an instrument. Where did you learn to talk like that? Some Panama City sailor wanna hump our. Take crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here. I'll give you one other example, just since that reignited the passion of impressions for me. One of the best ever, Al Pacino, right? It's not even an excellent impression of mine, but he's just such a great example of a speaker that knows how to command a crowd. You're watching, what was that movie that he did with the kid from Batman and Robin? No. Son of a Woman, right? And he has to go and like save the kid in the big speech, and in the formal, stuffy Ivy League school, they're trying to kick him out. And he stands up and he's blind, right? So that adds drama. And he stands up and he's like, all of you are out of order. You think you're gonna punish this young boy. Oh no, I tell you, you're out of order. I'm barely getting warmed up. Have fun with it. Practice, very important. Now, if you're nervous, if you're not used to speaking in front of people, giving presentations, don't be in your head the whole time. Do something proactive about it. Practice it. But don't just practice by rote repeating over and over again. That doesn't do anything for you. One of the most popular books in the last few years is Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, which is very similar to the book Talent is Overrated, which I enjoyed as well. And both talk about the premise that even the biggest geniuses in human history at what they do don't really have so much an intelligence difference or some kind of preternatural gift. They practiced the most. Mozart's father made him start playing piano at age 2. Tiger Woods' father started to make him play golf at age 3. Started making him text girls at age 4. Practice makes perfect. But the key that both of these books say is don't just practice for the sake of it. Always practice slightly outside of your comfort level. Don't do what you already know you do well. It's a waste of time. And don't practice so far something so different that it's not even valuable. Practice just outside of your level of comfort. And when you do that, you're always going to be expanding your skills just a little bit. And a great tip for that, videotape yourself. Tape yourself doing it. And I don't mean that sexually. Although, it's an option. But tape yourself. You can then, it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to watch themselves speak, but you can watch and see what it is that you do that is not how you'd like. What's boring you about yourself? And then, before your presentation, call a friend on the phone, on Skype, in person. Do your whole presentation. Do it to your cat. Do it to somebody at the supermarket. Do it in situations that are more uncomfortable for you. So then when you get to your coworkers who you know and talk to every day, no big deal.
All right, so now we're going to go away from tactics and some general extra wisdom. And again, not everything, the situations that you will probably find yourself in are less likely to be the on-stage talking to a couple hundred people. And when that's the case, I certainly hope this is helping. But where I think a lot of you are doing most of your speaking is in your workplace environment. It's when you're pitching people on your business idea. It's when you're talking to your boss. It's when you're talking to your direct reports. And there is just a set of mistakes that I constantly see every single person makes. So let's go through these. The first off is whenever you're giving a presentation, don't read your bullets. The biggest mistake that people make is there's a PowerPoint presentation with 5 bullets and they sit there reading them to an audience. I don't need you to read to me. I learned how to read when I was 5. Tell me something that's not on the slide. Have the slides be a picture and speak to what's going on there. Don't read to me. Number 2, again in the presentations, if when you're talking in a workplace environment in a presentation, you're not paying equal eye contact to everybody in the room there, they will start disengaging with you. The simplest way to keep somebody attached to your presentation is to make sure to make eye contact with them. So make sure when you're in a smaller room setting, when you're in a conference room, talking to 5 people in your company, that you give everybody an equal amount of time where you're looking and speaking directly to them. Filler. Ums, likes, so's. We all, when we pause or when we're thinking about what we have to say, fill up everything we have to say with, so I was going to give this presentation, I was thinking to myself that I really didn't understand what I had to talk about. And so I thought if I just focus in on what I thought was most important, then I'd absolutely do a great job in the presentation. You notice that now because it's so different from the way I've been speaking, but most of us speak like that most of the time. And when you're in an environment, not only is that a horrible just way to speak in general, but when you're in an environment where you have to convey a message, it takes away all your confidence, power, and credibility. And it's not just likes. I was watching Michelle Pfeiffer the other day on an interview in TV, and this is someone that's been an actress for 30 years and amazing. Every 5th word she was saying was It's what are you, an 18-year-old, college freshman? You're Michelle Pfeiffer. You should know how to speak without saying
And another one people use a lot, which is always weird to me, because it's not even one word or a syllable. A lot of people will fill up gaps with, you know what I'm saying? It's 5 words you're throwing in there. So I went to the market, you know what I'm saying? And this guy, you know what I'm saying? He says to me, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I know what you're saying. Cut it out.
And then there's the graduated step up from which I actually make a mistake all the time of. And I say so. I start off a point saying so. If Ben were to ask me a question in an interview.
This is something that a lot of tech people do, I've noticed. And y'all got to stop this. It sounds kind of arrogant, like you know everything and you're going to make $1 billion, but get it? But when someone asks you a question, just actually connect and answer the question. Someone says, so how do you plan to turn profitable? Say, that's a good question. Here's our strategy. Or say whatever it is. But don't say, so what our plan is. It's ridiculous. He does it all the time.
Next point in presentations is carrying on, is going on when you've either belabored a point too long or people have lost what you're talking about. And I'll tell you the most important tip I actually ever got in terms of running a meeting. And it came from a venture capitalist named Mike Spicer. He said, Jason, when you start off a meeting talking to your employees, whether it's one person, 5 people, 20 people, I want you to write on the board, this is what we're discussing right now. Just like the scientific method, the first thing is, what are we trying to solve for? Literally write on the board, this is what we're talking about right now. This is what we're trying to accomplish, and here's what's going to be the takeaway from it. And how many times have you been in a meeting with other people that you work with, and you get in an argument or something's going on, and you're 15 minutes in a half-hour meeting, and you're thinking to yourself, what is it that we're talking about here? I don't even know what we're talking about here. And the person who's running the meeting, it takes to the very end to even clarify what it is they're talking about. Don't assume when you're running a meeting that the people that are in that meeting with you actually know what the context of that is about or what you're trying to accomplish. Simply state when you go in, what we're trying to figure out here is how we increase revenue by 10% in the next 30 days. I've got 3 ideas. We're going to go over them. We're going to pick the one that's the best one. That may sound so simple, as if everyone should know that going in, but doing that one simple thing at the beginning of every meeting, I promise you, will set a context where people so much more get value out of what's going on there.
And this point here about being memorable, this is just an overall point to summarize a lot of the things that we've been talking about so far today, is when you're giving an important presentation, don't try to not be memorable. So many people try to not make a wave. So many people try to just go up there and just get it done. And what's the point of that? When you're up there, try to leave them with something that'll be an easy takeaway. Why is pop music so popular? Because it's hypnotic. Why is Larry the Cable Guy so popular? Because he says, get her done every 2 seconds. And it's a catchphrase, and it sticks with people. Make sure whatever you do it in a way that it sticks with people. Jason has been a very dynamic speaker since day one, because if I can share a story from our senior year of high school history class, AP History of Mr. Sprouse, ridiculous man. He would make us do these Wall presentations from this book written by a guy named Wall. We'd have to take one chapter and just give reports on it. And it was the most boring part of class ever. And Jason would do what I called off-the-wall presentations. He literally would just go nuts, and it was so fascinating. He literally would drop a stack of books and stand on a chair, and he's like, I'm the guy in history. Then Winston Churchill's like, blah, 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 and go to a teacher's fat belly and jiggle it around. The guy's like, what are you doing, Jason? But you would be engaged completely with what he's doing. Don't be so egotistical that you can't look vulnerable or stupid. That's a very, very key thing that Jason has actually taught me a lot over the years.
I think you're Jason's very good at looking stupid all the time.
I didn't say it. But that's the key, is don't be people with huge egos are the only ones who can be embarrassed. If you have because a huge ego is the same thing as a fragile ego. Your ego is there to puff out and protect you from people seeing really that you're the scared little cat inside. Just be a normal person. Don't be so important. Don't be so self-important that you can't be silly. If your point is better made by dropping your pants and throwing an orange at somebody's face, do it. That's rare, but if it happens.
Well, I've got a story of how Ben was much more memorable than I ever was. This was probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, and Ben was pitching his own TV show to MTV. And he had heard that when Tom Green had pitched his show and got it, that Tom Green had done this outrageous stunt in the meeting where he was giving his pitch for his show like normal, and then all of a sudden got up, put shaving cream over every inch of his body, went down on the ground, pretended like he was having a seizure, went absolutely nuts, then just quietly got up, wiped himself up, sat down in the chair, and started giving the presentation like nothing had happened at all. Yeah. And so Ben I remember we were talking in your parents' kitchen. You're like, I've got to figure out something more memorable to do. I've got to figure out something more memorable to do. And so I didn't know what he actually did until afterwards. And I'll set it up and you can tell. But Ben actually picked up.
You're about to say it. Let me say it.
Oh, you're going to say it? Okay.
No, you tell my story.
No, please.
I'll tell it. It was weird. But basically, I wanted to go and pitch MTV this talk show I wanted to do. And so what I thought would be interesting is to go in with my writing staff. But I didn't have a writing staff. So I went to Home Depot and hired 3 day laborers. Jose, Ignacio, and Agustin. We still keep in touch. And They came in my car, and we were driving to what they thought was going to be a day of hard labor. I explained, no, it's your lucky day. We're going to pitch MTV, and you're my writers. I got pulled over by the police moments later. True story. And so as the police were approaching the car, I said to the guys, and I know some broken Spanish, I'm like, whatever, in Spanish, I told them, like, whatever you do not say that I hired you for day labor, because I didn't, and you will go to jail and I'll go to jail. And they're like, sí, no es un problema. Cop comes, he pulls one guy out of the back seat to like separate us, and the first thing I hear the guy say to the police officer is, he es el jefe. I'm like, no. So the cop's like, he says you hired him for work. I'm like, sir, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but I'm pitching a show to MTV. And I thought it would be hilarious to have 3 guys who don't speak English as my comedy writers. And the cop said, that's very funny, you can keep them. We went in, pitched MTV, and every time I would reference some bit that I had written for the show, I'm like, we have movie spoofs like Jewish Maguire. That was Augustine's idea. And they would just go, see. It was a lot of fun.
If it's worth saying, it's worth repeating. Create a meme. And I know a lot of you who have come to presentations before and heard me talk about entrepreneurship. I have this saying that I often talk about, which is when you're first starting a business, it's not what to do and how to do, which are the questions you should be focused on. It's why. Meaning, what's your why? Make sure it's a big why, that you're connected to it. And if you don't have a big why, and if you don't know what it is, and if it's not burning and driving you, then you'll always let the what and the how get in the way of that thing you said you were going to do. I'll repeat that. If you don't have a big why, then you'll always use the what and the how as an excuse for not doing that thing you said you were going to do. Almost in every talk I give, I pick out 2, 3, 4 points to just emphasize and repeat. And one of the most important things that you can do to signify to an audience is repeating a key phrase over and over. The other thing that you can do is create some kind of meme, some kind of word or voice or action that you're all going to take here and leave with. And it creates a lot of power. Like, this talk is a confined unit right now. I mean, yeah, it's going to live online afterwards, but it's being told within the context of this room. But if you all leave and you're talking about Jason's power of why, then it spreads, then it grows, then it's organic, and then it lives outside of these walls. And it's not just for major important points, but you referenced earlier, right? Catchphrases of comedians, get her done.
Right.
Or what's the other one by Jeff Foxworthy, right?
You know you're a redneck if every joke he tells, that's the first sentence. How ridiculously stupid is that? One of the most famous, successful comedians in the world. I'm not as successful as a stand-up comedian because I don't do that. I don't do catchphrases because I'm stuck with this annoying thing I call artistic integrity. Thank you. But that maybe matters when your product is your presentation, which is mine.
By the way, Ben is willing to sell his artistic integrity for $1 million.
$100,000. Point being, my product is my presentation, so I don't choose to be that style. But when your product is working at a company, at a tech company, you're giving a presentation, you're not about the speech. The speech is a means to an end. So use it. Use catchphrases. Use repetition. Use phrases that are going to be great takeaways that get stuck in people's heads. Because otherwise you walk away one of 2 ways. You walk out thinking, oh, it was a good talk. What was it about? You know, they talked about good business principles. Or it was the power of the why, and it was this, and it was this. Yeah. A lot of P's here. Premise plus perfect progression. Put that together last night. I was pretty proud of it. Oh, a lot more P's right there. Put that together last night. I was pretty proud of it. I was pretty, all right. You guys don't care. For me, it's a nice little milestone. What I mean by this is simple. Oftentimes when you have a good product, you have good content, you have great things you want to say, and you'll give a presentation and you'll leave and you'll realize it felt kind of flat. You'll realize it didn't really get received in the way that I wanted to be received by that audience. Why? What happened? It's always your fault. Jerry Seinfeld said it. You can never blame an audience. It's always your fault, okay? You need to go back and figure out the logic progression of what you said and make it more perfect. Your premise is great. But oftentimes people screw up and do not figure out how to make sure their audience receives it well. Because when you write something, you come up with an idea, in your own head, it makes sense because you're filling in the gaps with the brain that thought of it. But you're going to a blank slate of people who don't know what you're saying. You need to make sure that they really understand exactly what it is. Chris Rock said it one time. He said that comics come to me all the time and they're like, man, I have this great joke and it's just not hitting. I don't know what it is. And he says to them, your joke probably is great, but you're not getting the audience there. Sometimes I'll write a joke and there'll be one word missing. And I realize, oh, if I didn't say the word just makes it clear to the audience that I'm saying this is the only instance where this actually matters. And that's what makes the point hit home so much more clearly. So if something's not working, go back to the drawing board. You can really map out your logic progression like a mathematical formula. Here's the first thing I'm saying, my premise, my thesis. My first example, I get that's perfectly explaining the first part of it. The second part, my wording's a little jumbled and it's not clear exactly how that ties back to the premise. You add one sentence, one phrase, one word to link it better, all of a sudden it'll connect a whole different degree. I'll have a bit that I know is a hilarious bit I thought of, and I'll perform it, and it'll get a laugh, and then the big part at the end, I'll lose people, and I realize it's my fault. There was something missing. And I'll go back, I'll add one word, and the bit will kill.
What we purposely didn't make as a topic is how to add humor into a presentation. And the reason I do that is because most of the time I think you can't just force humor. And there are a lot of times I've given the talks here where if I say something and the audience is thinking it's funny, I'll keep going with it. And now I'm not a comedian like Ben, but what I can tell you is don't ever try canned humor. If you want to make people laugh, the best thing to do is talk to them about their situation. One of the most interesting quotes I ever read in Robert Heinlein's A Stranger in a Strange Land is that laughter is a release from pain. So if you want to know the things to make people laugh is talk to them about their situations. The reason you laughed when I was talking to you about the meetings is you're like, oh yeah, I've been in that meeting where I just completely didn't understand what was going on. I talked to you about your situation, and for those of us that aren't comedians, it's really valuable. But there are a couple tools that you can break down, and when I try to use humor in presentations, I'll look at specific things like misdirection, and you have a great joke about misdirection and the homeless guy, right?
Well, no, it's actually, there was this story that actually just kind of affected me. It's a real life thing that happened in my life, and I sometimes share it on stage just as a way to like connect to people's humanity and right off the bat, you know, set the tone in a certain way. And it's something that happened to me years ago. I was outside of a comedy club in Hollywood, and this homeless guy walked up to me, and he asked me for $1, and I gave him $1, you know, it's no big deal. And we ended up shaking hands. We had this really nice human moment shaking hands, and I was curious. So I asked him, what's your opinion of what's going on in Afghanistan right now? And he pointed out this sign that said, God bless America. And he said, the problem is, that should say, God bless the world. Right when he said that, I realized, damn, I have to wash my hands now. That's such a homeless guy, that's messed up. It's called a bait and switch. You pull people on, play their sympathies, and then BAM!
Are there any other categories of humor that you think people can use to apply to a presentation?
Well,
I always think the most valuable, right, is talk to the audience about them and the situation they're in, make fun of them right there, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, surprise is very important. Just anytime you can say something that they don't see coming, that's a great way to shock people into laughter. Laughter usually it's a release of pain, but it hits you most immediately in the best way when it's a surprise. So just when you're writing, when you're crafting your speech, your presentation, just try to have something that's out of left field in a clever way, and you can test it out on your friends, on your dog, whatever. Dog won't laugh probably, but
like
well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's not, like, we can all relate to certain things in life, right? Like, how many of you have been driving, has this ever happened to you? You're ever driving along late at night, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you think you see a panther jump out of you? And then you realize, oh, I just drove drunk into the zoo again. I thought I was seeing things for a minute, thank God. So you just kind of make sure, it's a logic progression. Like when I wrote that joke, I was thinking, okay, it's ridiculous, you're driving around, everybody relates to that. Panther pops out of you, it makes no sense to people. Sometimes you get laughs there, sometimes you don't. But then to justify an absurdity like that by saying you drove drunk into the zoo, it's the only scenario possibly where a panther would jump out of you randomly, just figure out the logic progression.
So I often, I'm going to talk about stories, but to prompt my point, can you actually tell your story of the first time you ever did Kilborn and what that was like?
Sure. So that joke about the shaking the homeless guy's hand was the joke I used to open my performance, the first time I got to perform stand-up on national television on the Late Late Show, which was hosted by Craig Kilborn before Craig Ferguson took it over. And who knows what Craig will take it next. But it's a one stipulation for that show. It's a Craig of some sort. And I was very nervous. I was 25 years old. It was 9 years ago. And I was asked to perform. And it's essentially live TV. It's live to tape, performing to 1 million people. And I hadn't been nervous already for a couple of years doing stand-up, but I was very nervous for this performance. No takes, no redos, and you have 4.5 minutes. And I practiced that thing incessantly for the 2 weeks before the show. I did it like 21 times in the 2 weeks before I went and did the performance. And I kept telling myself the day of, I was not nervous. But I had to acknowledge I was definitely stressed, which meant I was very fucking nervous. I just didn't want to acknowledge it in words, but I was stressed. I mean, I was like dry cleaning like 15 shirts and making sure I had the right options there, and the car service came, and I'm like, do I look all right? How's my hair? Do I know the jokes? And we repeat it. They come, car service picks me up. My friend Scott joins me, and we drive down there. We go in the dressing room. Lo and behold, guess who the guest was on the show with me? Lisa Loeb. Had a crush on her my whole life. She walks into the dressing room. I'm like, oh shit, Lisa Loeb is here. Added to my nerves. It was not good. I said something stupid to her. It was very embarrassing. And then I had a beer before I went on. I don't drink before I perform, but I wanted to have a beer, relax. We're walking down the hallway. They're like, you're on in 2 minutes. You ready for your national television debut? I'm like, shut up! Don't say it like that. And we're walking down the hall, and Scott thought it would pump me up to start singing. He's like, sing with me. He's like, you better lose yourself in the moment. You own it. You better never let it go. I'm like, this is too much buildup. And I go, and I haven't even met Craig Kilborn. He doesn't even come back and say hi. I go around the corner. Literally, I'm around a corner from national television. Kilborn's behind his desk, like 20 feet away, looks at me. He goes, I'm like, that was too slick. I'm fucking nervous. He outdressed me just like Jason did. What do I do? And I walked out there, and he introduces me. He's like, ladies and gentlemen, Ben Glebe. And I walk out, and I start telling the first joke of 4.5 minutes. That homeless joke I just told you is like 45 seconds long. And it's a unique joke in that most often, jokes, you'll have your first punchline within like 10 to 15 seconds. Especially on a TV set, it's incredibly tight. Nobody starts their TV sets with 35 or 40 seconds of buildup of a sad, serious story with no joke whatsoever. So that was already like nerve-wracking. And I'm telling the story, and I almost completely forgot to say I shook the guy's hand, which is the whole joke. Imagine I don't say I shook his hand. I gave a guy $1, and he says, we all need to be one planet, and I'm like, I gotta go wash my hands now? It would make zero sense. And I skipped over saying that I shook his hand for a second, and I was like, in my brain, I'm like, oh shit. So I'm like, oh, by the way, we shook hands, had a nice human moment shaking hands. And at that moment, I had a thought in my brain, as I was telling these jokes I told 1 million times, right after I was stumbled on that joke, I remember vividly having this thought. While I was still talking, my second track of my brain said, right now your career is gonna go one of two ways. Either you're gonna bomb horribly right now, never be invited on television again, your career's done, or you're gonna focus and you're gonna crush this thing. And a piece came about me, and just a great piece of advice just popped in my head from nowhere, and it said, stop worrying, focus on your jokes. Focus on the content. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, or if you're pausing it right, or if they're reacting well. Just focus on the jokes that you wrote that were good enough to get you invited on national television. And from that moment, I just relaxed into it and just told my jokes and killed the end of the thing, got a bunch of applause breaks, and from there on, I've had a career in television, thankfully. Thanks. Thanks so much.
The reason I asked Ben to talk about that is what I think most of us don't do enough of is realize that we all learn through analogies. I can explain a point to you, but if I tell you a story, you're going to imagine yourself as one of those people, and you're going to follow the events of the story along. And the same aha moment that they have, you're going to have as well. And the art of public speaking and mastering presentations is a lot about the art of just being a really great storyteller and knowing how to tell stories. And one of the specific tools that I've often used in speeches like this is a principle I was actually taught in studying hypnosis and things like it called an open loop, which is you start telling a story and then you actually never complete it. And what will happen is unconsciously the audience wants resolution. They want to know what happened. And at some point later on, you'll come back to complete that story. But being able to tell stories in your presentations is extremely powerful. And think about, what examples do I want to use? Because it's not just the content, but it's the examples of what you've lived through and what people have lived through that really makes all the difference.
Jason and I actually had, on that point real quickly too, before I move on to this, is Jason and I had the same job when we first graduated college. We were motivational speakers actually for high school students, which is silly because we'd accomplished nothing. So I don't know what we were trying to motivate them to do, but Jason had learned that in his hypnosis training, and he and I both added into our presentation this open loop where we would start the presentation. I would tell this fictional story about this playoff game. My high school football team that I did play for but never got playing time, but these kids didn't need to know that. I told them that I was put in at the end of the game and we needed to catch a touchdown to win the game and get into the playoffs, and the quarterback drops back and I run and I break past my defender and the quarterback throws the ball in the air, and as the ball's in the air I realized, and in a moment like that, you all can realize in life moments like that, and I'd go off into a 45-minute presentation, and every time the presentation at the very end, the crowd would be riveted, and the second I'd be done, and that's our presentation, the crowd would go, "Did you catch the ball?" And I'd lied to them and said, "I caught that ball."
Can you talk about the pancake quote?
Absolutely. This might be apparent, but so many people don't think to construct their presentations in this way. What's essential is to start strong and end even stronger when you present. Save your best nuggets, your best, most effective things for the very beginning, and then your absolute best for the very end. You have to do both. You have to bookend it with dynamic examples, dynamic anecdotes that really take the crowd into your own hands. And one of my favorite comedians, the late Mitch Hedberg, said it best in a quote where he said, and it applies to any kind of presentation or speech, but he was speaking about stand-up comedy. He goes, "Stand-up comedians, you got to start a show strong and you have to end the show strong. You can't be like pancakes. You can't be fantastic at the beginning and by the end you're like, fuck it."
So we're about coming to our end, and we'll go to questions for a bit, but I've got an open loop to close for all of you, which is what happened at that very first stage hypnosis show. So I said so. I should not have done that.
So what?
I was on the phone with Topher, and he said, "Okay, if you want to know how to do a stage hypnosis show, I'll tell you right now." And I had never taken a single note all throughout college or high school, but I had a laptop, I had a pen, I had a sheet of paper. I was like, "Let's do this." He said, "When you get to that show, Jason," I said, "Yes." He said, "When you get to that show, I want you to pretend like you are the world's greatest hypnotist." I said, "All right, cool. Now what?" He's like, "That's it." He's like, "Fucker, say what?" What do I need to do to make this work? Because I just did this in front of 30 people and got laughed out of my own living room, and I'm going to get the shit beat out of me by 200 guys in a fraternity if I don't make these people hypnotize and do crazy shit. He said, "Jason, when you get there, all I want you to do is pretend like you are the world's greatest hypnotist." And I was freaking out. I had the show in 3 days. I'd never quit on anything I had to do, but I was literally thinking I was just going to call and say I was sick or something. But Ben convinced me, "No, just go do it. I'll be there for moral support for you. I'll do 15 minutes of stand-up comedy to start." And this is before I'd ever done any stand-up comedy. "And I'll run the sound for you." And so Ben and I go to the show, and I was freaking out. I was sweating, I was nervous, I was panicked. I thought this thing's going to be a huge failure. But all I had to go on is I had to pretend like I was the world's greatest hypnotist. So I took this one piece of advice and I magnified it. I completely characterized it. When I got there, I became this cult leader. It was like I came in and off a fog machine in a cape. I was like, hello. Tonight, you're going to be mesmerized and hypnotized. And I went into the trance with everybody, and I was freaking out. I was like, this isn't going to work. My self-talk was, these people know I'm a fraud. They know I'm a fake. They know this isn't going to work. But on the outside, ugh. And I had these 12 people lined up, and I had them in a trance, just like I did with the other people. And I looked over at Ben, and he just gave me this nodding approval, like, like, the door's right here. We can get out quickly if it doesn't work, Jason. And I started telling everybody, the room's getting colder and colder. I said, on the count of 3, you're going to open up your eyes, and you're going to realize the room's getting colder and colder. 1, 2, 3. And then every time I said a certain word, the room was going to get even more cold. And people started shivering. And I was stunned. I had no idea what was going on at all. And then Ben had to prompt me, like, keep going with the games. And so then I used a different word. I said, okay, now every time I say, so-and-so, the room's going to get hotter. And people started taking off their sweatshirts and panting. And I had no idea how the words coming out of my mouth were making anybody do anything. And I was so nervous. I had so much nervous energy, I started uncontrollably laughing. I could not stop laughing. I could not stop laughing. My one saving grace was Ben turned off my mic, and everyone else was laughing so hard that it kind of got drowned out. And then Ben and I were like, hey, we can make a business out of this. And so we started calling other colleges to do shows. And I went to my second stage hypnosis show, and I pretended to be the world's greatest hypnotist, and it worked. And I went to the third show, and I pretended to be the world's greatest hypnotist, and it worked again. And the fourth. But then when I got to my fifth show, I forgot to pretend to be the world's greatest hypnotist. I just felt like I was. What we gave you all here today was a bunch of information that we threw out. You have things that we do and have tried to do to master public speaking. It will be a lifelong endeavor for the both of us in different worlds. And there are times I'd like to try to be funny, and there are some times that Ben likes to try to be serious.
Rarely.
But any important moment that you're going to step into, any meaningful thing that you're going to have to do, your faith in yourself and your belief in yourself is going to have to precede the external validation that you're looking for.
Another thing you have to realize also about confidence is simple. What Jason's saying about pretending you are what it is, acting as if, that's what all of confidence is. That's not being fake or weird. That's what confidence means if you think about it. Because if you know for 100% something's going to be successful, there's no need for confidence. You don't need confidence to walk up a staircase. You know you're going to be fine. Confidence is your level of confidence is determined by how you present that you are in control in something that you don't for sure know is going to go well. So that's always what confidence is. The most confident people on earth are just pretending they know it's going to go well, even though they don't really. So you have that access to that tool as well. It's free. Just decide, I don't know for sure. There could be lightning that hits this whole audience during the thing. I'm just going to pretend I know it's going to go well and deliver with that kind of confidence. And they can't tell the difference because there is no difference.
So if there's any one thing that we hope that you take away here from this evening, and we hope that these specific points helped, and we hope that the examples and analogies did, and we'll open up to questions now, but take away the fact that whatever kind of speaker you want to be, just pretend your way into that experience. Because I promise you, if you keep doing that, at some point you're going to wake up and you're going to have an aha moment that I am that speaker, I am that great presenter, and you're not going to feel like you're faking it like most of us do a lot of the time anyways. So thanks for coming out here today, guys.